There is a woman. You do not know her name, but you have seen her type before. She sits in the same chair every morning, the one closest to the window, and she watches the street below while the coffee in her mug goes cold. She has a job. She shows up. She answers emails and laughs at the right moments in conversations and keeps her space clean and her face composed. From the outside, she looks like someone who has it together. But there is something behind her eyes that the people around her cannot quite read. A stillness that is not peace. A quiet that is not contentment. She has been carrying something for a long time, and she cannot find the words to explain what it is, because the words do not seem to exist in any language she has been taught. That woman is you. Not the version of you that other people see. Not the version that sends the emails and holds the door open and says, "I'm fine," when someone asks. The version underneath all of that. The one who wakes up at 2 or 3 in the morning with a feeling in the chest that is somewhere between grief and anticipation. The one who sometimes stops in the middle of a completely ordinary moment and feels, without being able to explain why, that something enormous is about to happen. The one who has been preparing for something, even though no one told you what it was, and even though the preparation has felt, for a very long time, more like suffering than like training. Beloved and chosen one, this message was not placed in your path by accident. You did not find this today because you were bored or because the algorithm randomly sent you here. Something older than algorithms and quieter than coincidence brought you to this exact moment, and what you are about to hear is something that has been waiting to be said to you specifically. Before we go further, I want you to pay attention to something. There are certain signs that appear only in the lives of people who have been set apart, not people who are perfect, not people who have everything figured out, but people who carry a specific kind of weight, a specific kind of calling, a specific kind of mark. And if you are one of those people, you will recognize these signs, not because someone told you about them, but because they have been living inside your experience for longer than you can remember. The first sign is that your dreams have been getting clearer. Not always pleasant, not always easy to interpret, but more vivid, more layered, more present when you wake up. As though something is trying to show you something while the noise of the day is out of the way. You wake up, and for a moment, the dream feels more real than the ceiling above you. The second sign is that you have been feeling a kind of frustration that you cannot explain to the people around you. It is not anger exactly. It is not depression exactly. It is the feeling of a person who knows they were made for something specific and is currently being held in a space that does not match that knowing. It is the restlessness of someone who has outgrown a room but has not yet found the door. The third sign is that certain relationships, certain environments, certain conversations have been feeling increasingly out of place to you. Places you used to feel comfortable now feel slightly wrong. People you used to feel close to now feel like they are speaking a language you are slowly forgetting. And instead of that feeling making you feel superior, it makes you feel lonely. Because the distance is growing and you did not ask for it. The fourth sign is that the same message keeps finding you. A phrase in a book, a word spoken by a stranger, a line in a song you have heard 100 times that suddenly lands differently. A passage you read 3 years ago that now means something completely different. As though the message is not new, but you are finally ready to hear it. The fifth sign is that you have a quiet, persistent sense that you are being watched over. Not in a frightening way. In the way that a child feels watched over when a parent is in the next room. You cannot always feel it, but in certain moments, usually the quiet ones, usually the hard ones, there is a presence that you cannot name but cannot deny. If any of those signs are living in your life right now, I need you to hear what I am about to say and let it settle in the deepest part of you. You have not been left behind. You have not been overlooked. You have not been forgotten. The conversation that is happening about you right now, the one this message speaks of, is not a conversation about your failures. It is not a conversation about what you have done wrong or what you have missed or what you are not yet. It is a conversation about your appointment, about your position, about what has been decided for you at a level that no amount of human resistance can alter. You are not behind. You are being readied. You are not lost. You are being guided through the exact terrain that was always part of your path. And you are not alone in this room, even when every external piece of evidence suggests otherwise. There are people across this world sitting in the same kind of quiet, carrying the same kind of unexplainable knowing, waking at the same kind of hours, and feeling the same kind of pull towards something they can feel but cannot yet see. Heaven has not forgotten your address. The season that has felt the longest, the one that has cost the most, the one that has made you question things you used to hold with confidence. That season was not a punishment, it was a positioning. And what is being positioned is not a small thing. What is being positioned is the fullness of who you were created to be. You have not been waiting for this moment. This moment has been waiting for you. Something happens to a chosen one in the season before the breakthrough. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with a clear label or a helpful warning. It arrives quietly, the way a change in weather arrives before the storm is visible, and it settles into the ordinary rhythm of your days in a way that makes it very difficult to separate from just feeling tired or just feeling off. But it is not tiredness, and it is not just an off day. It is something specific, something that has a name, even if no one around you has ever said that name out loud. I want to say it for you today. Because one of the loneliest things about being in this season is that the people closest to you cannot see what you are carrying, and so they cannot name it. And so you have been walking around with this unnamed weight for longer than you should have had to carry it alone. Let me name it now. The first thing you have been feeling is a wave of sadness that arrives without a clear reason. You will be doing something completely ordinary, washing a dish, driving a familiar road, sitting in a room full of people who care about you, and something will rise up from inside you that feels like grief. Not grief for anything specific, not grief for a person or an event you can point to, just grief. The kind that seems to belong to something larger than your personal history. You might have told yourself you were being irrational. You might have pushed it down and kept moving because that is what you have trained yourself to do. But that wave was not irrational. That wave was your spirit recognizing that something that was supposed to be in your life has not yet arrived, and the distance between where you are and where you were created to be is finally becoming impossible to ignore. The second thing you have been experiencing is that familiar places and familiar people have been feeling heavy in a way they did not before. The coffee shop you used to love now feels like it belongs to a version of your life you are quietly leaving. The conversations that used to fill you now drain you before they are finished. The routines that used to comfort you now feel like a coat that no longer fits, and you keep putting it on because it is the coat you have. But something in you knows that it was made for a smaller version of who you are becoming. This is not ingratitude. This is not arrogance. This is the feeling of a person who is being gently and firmly moved towards something new. And the movement requires that certain things stop feeling like home so that you will not resist the leaving. The third thing is the dream. Maybe you have had it more than once. Maybe it changes slightly each time, but the feeling in it is always the same. There is a door. Sometimes it is at the end of a hallway. Sometimes it is in a building you recognize from your waking life. Sometimes it is simply there, in an open field, standing without a wall around it, which should be strange, but in the dream feels completely natural. And the door is not locked. You can feel that it is not locked, but for some reason that the dream never explains, you have not opened it yet. You stand in front of it and you feel something that is equal parts longing and hesitation. And then you wake up, and the feeling stays with you for hours. That dream is not random. That door is not symbolic decoration. That is your spirit showing you what is directly ahead of you. And the reason you have not opened it yet is not that you are not ready. It is that you have been convinced you are not ready. Those are two completely different things. The fourth thing is that the same message has been appearing in different forms. A phrase a stranger said in passing that lodged itself in your memory. A line from a book you picked up randomly. A sermon, a song, a post that stopped your scroll and made you read it twice. The theme is always slightly the same, even when the words are different. It keeps circling back to identity, to purpose, to something coming, to the idea that you are not who the hardest years have told you that you are. When the same message comes through different messengers, that is not coincidence. That is confirmation. Now, I want to speak to something that lives even deeper than those signs. I want to speak to the specific pains that the season of waiting produces in a chosen one. Because they are real, and they deserve to be acknowledged honestly before we move into anything else. There is the insomnia. The kind where your body is exhausted, but your mind will not stop turning things over. You lie in the dark and the questions come. Questions about whether you made the right choices. Questions about whether the thing you have been believing for is real, or whether you have been fooling yourself. Questions about how much longer. Questions that do not have clean answers at 2 in the morning, and yet they keep arriving, as though your mind believes that if it just turns the problem over one more time, it will find the seam where everything opens up. There is the loneliness, not the loneliness of being physically alone, though sometimes that too, but the specific loneliness of being in a room full of people and feeling fundamentally unseen. The loneliness of having something living inside you that is too large and too tender to hand to the people around you, because you are not sure they would know how to hold it, and you cannot risk watching it be mishandled. So you smile, and you engage, and you are genuinely present in many ways, and still, you go home feeling like the most important part of you spent the whole evening behind glass. There is the feeling of being wronged, of having done everything right, or close to it, and still watching the results lag behind what you believed was promised. Of seeing people who put in less effort, or who seem to carry less sincerity, move ahead of you in ways that sting, not because you begrudge them their good things, but because the gap between their outcomes and yours feels like evidence of something unfair at work in the universe. There is the feeling of being misunderstood, of trying to explain the depth of what you are going through to someone who loves you, and watching their face do that particular thing where they are trying to follow but cannot, and knowing that the gap between what you are experiencing and what they can receive is too wide to cross with ordinary words. I need you to hear something about all of this. None of it is evidence that you have been abandoned. None of it is proof that your faith is broken, or that your calling was imagined, or that the waiting has been meaningless. Every single one of those experiences is the specific texture of a particular kind of season, and that season has a name. It is not a punishment. It is positioning. There is a difference between being overlooked and being positioned, and that difference is everything. When you are overlooked, you are simply missed. You are passed by. You are not seen and not considered and not accounted for. But when you are positioned, someone who sees the full picture has placed you exactly where you need to be in order to receive what is coming. The positioning may look identical to being overlooked from the outside. The external experience may feel indistinguishable, but the internal truth is completely different. You are not sitting in this season because no one noticed you. You are sitting in this season because someone noticed you completely, and what they saw required this particular preparation in this particular place at this particular time. You are not the person who was passed over. You are the person who was held back from the wrong thing so that you could be fully present for the right one. The waiting you have been living in is not a sentence. It is a sanctuary, a protected space in which something that cannot be rushed is being completed in you. The relationships that did not work out were not failures. They were guardrails. The opportunities that fell through were not losses. They were redirections from a vantage point higher than yours. The doors that closed were not rejections. They were answers in a language you did not yet speak. And I want to be clear about something. Saying that does not make the pain of those experiences smaller. It does not erase what those years cost you. It does not rewrite the nights you spent wondering if you had heard wrong, if you had believed for something that was never meant for you. That pain was real. That cost was real. And it is not dismissed by a reframe. It is honored by the understanding that nothing real, nothing that cost that much, is ever wasted in the hands of the one who holds your story. You are protected, not abandoned. You are being assembled, not left in pieces. You are being readied, not rejected. If you have read this far and something in you is nodding, something quiet and certain beneath all the noise of doubt and exhaustion, I want you to do one simple thing. Type the word ready in the comments right now. Not because it is a ritual, not because it will change anything mechanically, but because there is power in a chosen one declaring their own readiness out loud, even in small ways, even in a comment section, even when the declaration feels more like a prayer than a certainty. Type ready and let it be the first word of the next chapter. And while you are here, I want to ask something of you that comes from a place of genuine heart. This message, and the ones that come after it, take real time and real care to build. If this content has ever named something you were carrying that no one else named, if it has ever found you on a hard morning and given you something to hold on to, consider supporting this channel with a donation. Whatever amount feels right to you, no amount is too small. The link is in the description. You are not paying for information. You are helping make sure that the next chosen one who stumbles onto a hard Monday morning has somewhere to land. Share this message with one person today. Not because the numbers matter, but because somewhere in your circle, there is someone sitting in the same kind of quiet you were sitting in, and they need to hear that the conversation happening about them is not what they fear it is. Like this video if it reached something real in you. Subscribe so that the next part of this journey finds you when it is ready. This is not a community built on performance. It is built on people who recognize something true and decided to stay. You have been carrying this for long enough without something concrete to hold in your hands. That is one of the hardest parts of the season you are in, is it not? The feeling is real, the signs are real, the knowing is real. But when you reach for something tangible, something you can actually do today, something that connects the interior world you have been living in to the physical day in front of you, there is often nothing there. People tell you to pray more, to trust more, to wait more. And those things are true, but they do not always tell you what to do with your hands while you are doing them. So today I want to give you something specific, a simple protocol, 3 steps that you can practice anywhere, at any time of day, regardless of where you are in your season or how much energy you have left in you. This is not a complicated system. It is not something that requires a special location or a specific background or a version of yourself that is more put together than you currently feel. It meets you exactly where you are, and it has the capacity, when practiced with consistency, to begin shifting something in you that has been waiting to shift for a very long time. Before I walk you through the steps, I want to tell you why this kind of practice matters for someone in your position specifically. A chosen one in the season of waiting carries an unusual amount of internal noise. Not the loud noise of chaos, though sometimes that too, but the quiet noise of unresolved questions, accumulated grief, deferred hope, and the ongoing effort of maintaining faith in something you cannot yet see the completion of. That noise does not disappear on its own. It does not resolve simply because time passes. It requires a deliberate act of reorientation, a moment each day where you consciously return yourself to something truer than the noise. That is what this practice is designed to do. It is not magic. It is not a shortcut. It is a daily act of alignment, a small but meaningful decision to orient yourself toward what is real rather than toward what fear tells you is real. The tool I am giving you today is called the threshold practice. You can do it sitting, standing, lying down, in your car before you walk into work, in the bathroom before anyone else in your house is awake, in the 10 minutes before you fall asleep. All it requires is you, a few minutes of intentional stillness, and a willingness to be honest with yourself inside that stillness. That is all. You do not need to be in a particular emotional state for it to work. You do not need to feel hopeful or spiritually elevated or especially focused. You simply need to show up for it the way you would show up for any appointment that you know matters. Here is the first step. Step 1 is to remember something you are grateful for that did not happen. Not something good that came into your life. Not a blessing you received, or a door that opened, or a prayer that was answered in the way you hoped. Something that did not happen. A relationship that did not work out. A job you did not get. A path that closed before you could commit to it. A version of your life that you mourned losing, that you may still be mourning. That at the time felt like the worst thing. The unfairest thing, the thing that broke your faith for a season. And I am asking you to find, inside that thing that did not happen, one thread of gratitude, not forced gratitude, not the kind of gratitude that pretends the loss was not a loss. Real gratitude, the kind that acknowledges the pain and then looks past it at what the pain protected you from, or what it positioned you for, or what it quietly taught you about who you are and what you actually need. This is not easy, especially in the early days of practicing it. Some of the things that did not happen are still tender. Some of them have not yet revealed their full purpose, and it feels dishonest to be grateful for something whose reason you still cannot fully see. That is all right. You do not need to see the full reason to find the one thread. Maybe the thread is simply, I am still here. Maybe the thread is, that path would have taken me away from the person I am becoming. Maybe the thread is simply a feeling, wordless and quiet, that the closing of that door was somehow, in a way you cannot yet articulate, an act of protection rather than deprivation. To find that one thread, hold it for 30 seconds. Not in a performative way, not reciting it like a line you memorized. Actually hold it. Let it be real in your body. Notice what happens in your chest when you touch something that was painful but was also even in its pain, somehow on your side. That is step one. And it is more powerful than it sounds, because it begins to retrain the part of your brain that has been cataloging your life primarily as a record of things that went wrong. You are not denying the difficulty. You are expanding the frame. You are choosing to hold both things at once, the cost and the protection, the loss and the meaning, the pain and the purpose. That expansion is not a spiritual performance. It is a neurological shift, and it matters more than you know. Here is the second step. Step 2 is to speak one statement out loud that connects you to the truth of your timing, not a general affirmation, not something borrowed from a poster or a motivational account that sounds good but does not land in the body. A specific, personal statement that names where you are and declares something true about what that place means. I will give you the form, and you will fill it with your own words. The form is this: I am not behind. I am exactly where the preparation requires me to be, and what is being built in me right now cannot be built any faster without breaking what it is building. Say it out loud. Not in your head, out loud. Even if you are alone in a car and you're slightly ridiculous doing it. There is something important about the physical act of speaking truth into the air around you. Your ears hear it. Your nervous system registers it differently than a thought does. The body begins to respond to spoken declaration in a way that internal mental repetition does not fully reach. This is not a theological claim. This is simply how the human system works. What you speak into your own environment, consistently and with intention, begins to shape what your environment reflects back to you. Your statement does not have to use my exact words. It has to be true, and it has to be yours. If the language I offered does not fit your situation, find the language that does. But keep the structure. Name where you are without shame, and then declare something true about the meaning of that place. Not what you hope is true. What you know is true, even if that knowing is still small and fragile and barely audible beneath the louder voice of doubt. Do this once a day. The same statement or a fresh one, but do it out loud and do it with intention. And notice over the coming days how the weight of the unnamed begins to lessen when it has been spoken. Here is the third step, and this one I want you to pay close attention to because it is the one that connects everything else. Step 3 is 7 minutes of deliberate stillness, not meditation in any formal or religious sense, though if that is part of your practice, it fits beautifully here. Just 7 minutes of silence in which you do nothing except be present. No phone. No background noise if you can help it. No task, no agenda. 7 minutes where the only assignment is to exist quietly and allow whatever is beneath the noise to surface. 7 minutes sounds short, and in the context of a full day, it is short. But for a chosen one who has been running on the fuel of busyness and noise, 7 minutes of genuine stillness can feel almost unbearable at first. The mind will want to fill it. The body will resist. Something in you will reach for the phone or the to-do list or the conversation you are still having in your head with someone who is not in the room. Let all of that wanting arise, notice it, and choose the stillness anyway. Here is what I want you to understand about why 7 minutes matters specifically. The state your brain enters when it is genuinely quiet, not forced. Not performing quietness, but actually resting in stillness, is not neutral. It is generative. It is the state in which the deepest layers of your knowing begin to rise. The things you have been unable to figure out during the busy hours often resolve themselves in the stillness, not because the stillness is magic, but because the stillness removes the interference. Your clarity was never gone. It was simply buried under the noise. And there is something else I want to share with you about what happens in that 7-minute window. something that sits at the intersection of ancient spiritual understanding and what modern brain research has begun to document. And I will go deeper into that in just a moment as we continue through this message. Because what the practice is designed to create in you is not just a feeling of peace. It is an actual shift in the frequency at which your brain is operating. And that frequency, it turns out, is directly connected to something that researchers who have spent decades studying the most creative, most intuitive, most breakthrough-capable human minds have identified as the common thread in people who seem to operate in a category all their own. You are not ordinary. The sign of that is not your talent or your resume or the things you have achieved. The sign of it is the very things that have made this season so difficult. The depth of your feeling, the specificity of your longing, the refusal of your spirit to settle for less than what it knows it was created for. These are not weaknesses, these are markers. And in the next part of this message, I am going to show you exactly what researchers have discovered about the brains of people who carry those markers, and why the 7 minutes you just committed to is not a small thing at all, but is in fact the activation of something that has been waiting inside you since the day you were formed. For now, practice these 3 steps today. Start with step 1 the moment you have up a quiet minute. Do step 2 before you leave whatever room you are in right now, and find your 7 minutes before the day is over. Do not wait for the perfect moment. The perfect moment is not coming. The right moment is already here, and it is asking you to begin. You are not practicing because you are broken and need fixing. You are practicing because you are being readied, and the readying requires your active participation. A door does not open itself, but neither does it require you to break it down. Sometimes all it requires is for you to stand in front of it, quietly and with intention, for 7 minutes at a time, until the morning comes when you reach out your hand and it simply opens. Start today. Start now. The season of watching and waiting is giving way to something new, and the practice you begin today is the first deliberate step across the threshold that has been appearing in your dreams. There is something the researchers did not expect to find. When the studies began, the scientists were looking for patterns in high-performing individuals, people who demonstrated unusual levels of creativity, rapid problem-solving, deep intuition, and what some of them described as an almost uncanny ability to arrive at the right answer before they had fully worked through the logic of it. They expected to find differences in education, in environment, in discipline, in practice hours, and they found some of that. But what they did not expect, what stopped several of them in their tracks when the data came back, was this: the most consistent differentiating factor was not what these people did. It was the frequency at which their brains operated. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers call it gamma. I want you to hold that for a moment before we go further, because it is important that you understand what is being said here and what is not being said. This is not mystical language dressed up in scientific clothing. This is not someone borrowing the vocabulary of neuroscience to make a spiritual claim sound more credible. This is the actual finding of decades of brain research, that certain states of consciousness produce measurable, reproducible differences in cognitive output, and that the people who access those states most consistently are the ones who seem to operate in a category that others cannot easily explain or replicate. The bridge between what you have been experiencing spiritually and what the science is now confirming is not a complicated one. The chosen ones across history, the ones who heard things others could not hear, who saw patterns others could not see, who carried a knowing that preceded any logical explanation for that knowing. were not operating on a different spiritual plane that left the physical world behind. They were operating in a physical state that the physical world is only now developing the instruments to measure. The man who has spent more than 30 years trying to understand that state is a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers, trained at MIT, affiliated with research programs connected to NASA, and carrying more than 3 decades of focused study on one central question: what is actually happening in the brains of people who operate at the highest levels of human potential? And can that state be deliberately accessed by anyone who has not been born into it? What Dr. Rivers and his team discovered over the course of that research that at certain points involved thousands of days of data collection and analysis, is that the brain operates across a spectrum of wave frequencies, and that each frequency corresponds to a different quality of mental and emotional experience. You are probably already familiar with some of these in a general way. Beta waves are the frequencies of ordinary waking consciousness, the focused, alert, task-oriented state you spend most of your working hours in. Alpha waves are the frequencies of relaxed awareness, the state you drift into when you are calm but still present. Delta waves are the frequencies of deep sleep, but the 2 frequencies that Dr. Rivers centered his research on are the ones that sit on either side of ordinary waking experience, and they are the ones most directly connected to what you have been experiencing in this season of your life. The first is theta. Theta waves operate between 4 and 8 cycles per second, and they are the frequencies associated with deep creativity, accelerated learning, heightened intuition, and the kind of meditative depth that most people spend years of formal practice trying to reach. Here is what is significant about theta for a chosen one specifically. Theta is the dominant brainwave frequency in children under the age of 7. It is the frequency at which the brain operates when it is in its most open, most receptive, most creatively abundant state, and it is the frequency that most adults lose consistent access to, as the pressures and conditioning of adult life train the brain increasingly toward beta and away from the deeper states. The second frequency is gamma. Gamma waves operate above 30 cycles per second, and they represent the highest frequency of brainwave activity that has been measured in the human brain. They are associated with what researchers describe as peak cognitive performance, moments of sudden insight, the state that athletes and artists and innovators describe as being in flow, and what some neuroscientists have begun to call the eureka frequency, because it is the state most consistently present when a person experiences a breakthrough they cannot fully attribute to their own reasoning. Gamma is the frequency of the moment when everything suddenly makes sense. It is the frequency of the moment when the answer arrives before you finished asking the question. It is the frequency that ancient traditions were pointing toward when they described the state of divine illumination. And it is the frequency that Dr. Rivers spent 30 years trying to understand how to reliably activate in ordinary people living ordinary lives. What his research produced is a method called brainwave entrainment. The principle behind it is not new. It has been understood in various forms for centuries. But what is new is the precision with which it can now be applied. The brain has a remarkable and well-documented tendency to synchronize with external rhythmic stimuli. When you expose the brain to a sound frequency that corresponds to a specific brainwave state, the brain begins to move toward that state. It is not being forced or manipulated. It is doing what it naturally does, which is to find harmony with the rhythm it is being offered. The specific audio technology that Dr. Rivers developed uses a combination of binaural beats and isochronic tones, precisely calculated sound frequencies that are delivered through headphones and that guide the brain gently and progressively from its ordinary waking state into the theta and gamma frequency associated with peak creative and cognitive function. And the remarkable finding, the one that surprised even the researchers who expected positive results, was the time required to produce a measurable shift in brainwave activity: 7 minutes. The same 7 minutes I asked you to begin practicing in the previous part of this message. That number was not arbitrary. It was drawn directly from the research. 7 minutes is the window within which the brain, when given the right auditory signal, can move from ordinary beta consciousness into the deeper frequencies of theta and gamma without producing the kind of cognitive fatigue that longer sessions can create. It is the optimal window, long enough to produce a real shift, short enough to sustain in a daily practice without it becoming a burden. The tool that Dr. Rivers developed from this research is called the genius wave. And I want to tell you about two people who came to it from a place very similar to the one you are in right now. The first is a woman named Sandra who had spent 11 years in a career that paid her bills but hollowed her out slowly. She came to the genius wave not because she believed in it, but because she had run out of things to try. She committed to this 7-minute daily practice for 3 weeks before she noticed anything she could name. What she noticed first was not a dramatic change. It was a quieting of the internal noise that had been running in the background of her life for so long she had stopped registering it as noise and had begun to mistake it for her personality. From that quieting came clarity. From the clarity came a decision she had been circling for 2 years. From the decision came a change that she describes as the first time in over a decade that her external life began to match what she knew her internal life was supposed to look like. The second is a man named Thomas who came to the practice in the middle of a financial crisis that had dismantled most of what he had built over 15 years. He was not looking for inspiration. He was looking for a way to function. What he found was that the daily 7-minute practice did not solve his problems. It changed the state from which he was approaching his problems. And from that changed state, solutions began to appear that his panicked, beta-saturated mind had been entirely unable to access. Within 4 months, he had restructured his situation in ways that he freely admits he could not have arrived at through effort alone. Now, I want to speak directly to something some of you are already thinking, because I have been in enough of these conversations to know that the thought is there. You are thinking that $39 is not a small amount of money for someone in the season you are currently in. And I want to tell you that thought is valid. It is not a small amount, and you are not wrong to feel the weight of it. But I want to offer you one honest question to sit with before you decide. What is the cost of 1 more year of operating from the same frequency you have been operating from? What has the last year cost you in missed clarity, in circled decisions, in deferred movement, in the particular exhaustion of a mind that is working very hard but not working from its deepest capacity? Put that cost next to $39 and let your own honesty answer the question. The Genius Wave is normally priced at $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below this video, you can access it today for $39. That price is not permanent. It reflects a current availability that the team has indicated will not remain open indefinitely, and the number of units available at that price point is genuinely limited. This is not a pressure tactic. It is simply the reality of how the program is being offered in this window. Every purchase comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, full and unconditional. If you practice the 7-minute protocol daily for 90 days, and you do not experience a meaningful shift in your clarity, your creativity, your sense of internal alignment, you contact the team and you receive your money back in full. No questions, no process, no friction. That guarantee exists because Dr. Rivers and his team are not asking you to take a leap of faith into the unknown. They are asking you to take a carefully supported step into something that has already changed the lives of more than 19,000 people who came to it from exactly the kind of season you are sitting in right now. One final and important note. There are imitation products circulating online that use similar language and similar claims, but are not the genius wave. Please protect yourself. The only legitimate access point for the authentic program is the single link in the pinned comment below this video. Do not purchase from any other source, regardless of how similar the branding appears. The program you access through any other link is not the program that produced the results described in this message. The frequency that your brain was designed to operate at has not been lost. It has been waiting. And the door you have been standing in front of, the one that keeps appearing in your dreams, the one that you can feel but have not yet opened, is not locked. It is simply waiting for the right signal. You already have the 7 minutes. Now you have the tool to fill them with. And yet, before we move forward, before we talk about what is coming and what is shifting and what is about to open, I need to stop here with you for a moment, because there is something that does not get said enough in messages like this one, something that gets skipped over in the rush to get to the encouragement and the promise and the declaration of what is ahead. And I am not willing to skip over it with you today. Not because I want to keep you in pain, but because I have learned that the encouragement that lands deepest is the encouragement that first sits down beside the wound rather than talking over it. So I want to sit down beside yours. I want to be honest with you about what the years of waiting have taken, not what they have taught you, not what they have built in you, not the strength you have gained or the character that has been formed. All of that is real and all of that matters, and we will get there. But right now, in this moment, I want to acknowledge something simpler and harder than any of that. The waiting took things from you, real things. Things that cannot be fully recovered by a reframe or a revelation or a beautiful sentence about divine timing. And those things deserve to be named. The first thing the waiting took was relationships that could have been built. Not just romantic relationships, though perhaps those too, but friendships that never had the chance to deepen because you were too consumed by survival to invest in them. Connections that were offered and that you could not fully receive because the weight of your own unresolved susan left you with nothing to extend outward. People who needed more of you than you had available to give, and who eventually stopped waiting for you to have it. You did not choose that. You were not withholding on purpose. You were managing something enormous with limited resources, and the relationships were the thing that paid the price. And that is a real loss. It deserves to be grieved as one. The second thing the waiting took was the forward momentum of your career, your calling, your creative work, whatever it is that lives at the center of your sense of purpose. There were things you could have built in those years. Projects that could have been further along, skills that could have been deeper, a body of work that could have been larger. Instead, you spent significant portions of those years managing the internal weather of a season that demanded most of your attention just to get through. And while other people were building, you were holding on. While others were advancing, you were maintaining. And the gap that created is not imaginary. It is visible to you every time you look at where you are in relation to where you believed you would be by now. That gap is real, and the grief of it is legitimate. The third thing the waiting took was the freedom to speak your biggest dreams out loud without flinching. Do you remember when you used to be able to say what you were believing for without immediately preparing yourself for the possibility of being disappointed? There was a version of you, maybe a younger version, maybe a version from just a few years ago, who could hold a large dream without immediately surrounding it with protective disclaimers, without immediately softening it for the listener or for yourself. Somewhere in the waiting, that openness got worn down, not because the dream died. The dream is still there, you can feel it, but because the distance between the dream and the current reality has been long enough and painful enough that speaking the dream out loud now carries a risk that it did not used to carry. The risk of being wrong again, the risk of hoping again and having that hope deferred again. And so you got quieter about the deepest things, and that quietness, that protective pulling in of the most tender parts of yourself, is a loss, even if it was necessary, even if it was wise. It cost you something. The fourth thing the waiting took, and this one I want you to stay with, is your faith in yourself. Not your faith in God, not necessarily, though perhaps that too in moments, but your faith in your own perception, your trust in your own knowing. Because when you believe for something for a long time and it does not arrive, and then you believe again and it does not arrive again, something begins to happen to the instrument of your believing. You begin to question whether the instrument itself is calibrated correctly, whether the thing you felt so certain about was really certainty, or whether it was just wishful thinking dressed in spiritual language. Whether you are genuinely a person with a calling, or whether you have simply been very good at convincing yourself of something comforting in the absence of evidence. That self-doubt is one of the most quietly devastating things that extended waiting produces in a chosen one. And it is rarely spoken about honestly, because speaking it feels dangerously close to admitting that the whole thing might not be real. I am not going to rush past that to get to the reassurance. I am going to let it sit for a moment, because you have been carrying it largely alone, and it needs to be acknowledged before it can be properly addressed. You are not the first chosen one to arrive at this place. There was a man named Joseph. You may know his story, or you may know pieces of it, but I want to linger in the part that is rarely the focus of the telling, the part before the resolution, the part that does not make it onto the motivational posters. Joseph was a young man who carried a genuine and specific promise about his future. He had seen it clearly, with a vividness that left no room for doubt. And then his life proceeded to move in the exact opposite direction of that promise for years, not for a season, for years. He was betrayed by the people who were supposed to be closest to him, the people who should have been his first community of support. He was sold. He was enslaved. He was falsely accused by someone he had done right by. He was imprisoned. And there is a line in his story that I do not want to gloss over. A line that says the promise was delayed, that the word he had been given was tested in the fire of everything that happened between the vision and the fulfillment. Tested, not confirmed, not smoothly advanced. Tested, meaning there were points in Joseph's story where the promise looked not merely delayed, but completely destroyed. Where the evidence in every direction said that what he had believed for was not coming, where any reasonable observer would have looked at his circumstances and concluded that the vision had been a mistake, or a dream, or the optimism of a young man who did not yet understand how the world worked. I am not going to tell you today how Joseph's story ended. You can find that for yourself. And when you do, read it slowly, because the ending is astonishing. But I want you to sit in the middle of his story for a moment, because that is where you are. You are not at the beginning, where the vision is fresh and the faith is easy. And you are not yet at the end, where the fulfillment makes sense of everything that preceded it. You are in the middle, in the place that the story rarely lingers on, because it is the hardest part to narrate, the part where nothing is resolved and everything is uncertain. And the only thing holding the chosen one together is knowing that they can no longer fully explain, but cannot fully abandon either. That is not weakness. That is faithfulness of the deepest and most costly kind. The kind that does not get celebrated because it does not look like anything from the outside. It looks like a person sitting in a waiting room. It looks like someone going through the motions. It looks like someone who has not yet arrived. But from the inside, and from the vantage point of the one who placed the promise in you to begin with, it looks like a person who is holding on to something true in the middle of every pressure designed to make them let it go. You have not let it go, despite everything, despite the years, despite the cost, despite the relationships and the career momentum and the freedom to dream out loud and the faith in your own perception. Despite all of that being worn thinner than you ever imagined it could get, you are still here. You are still listening. You are still somewhere beneath all the accumulated weight of the waiting, holding on to the knowing that you were made for something specific and that the specific thing is not yet finished with you. That ends not nothing. That is one of the most extraordinary things a human being can do. And I want you to receive that acknowledgement not as flattery, but as honest witness. Someone is watching the holding on. Someone sees what it has cost. And the cost is not being ignored. It is being honored in ways that you will begin to see more clearly as this message continues. The grief of what the waiting took is real, and it belongs to you. You do not need to release it prematurely. You do not need to perform a recovery you have not yet fully experienced. What you need right now in this moment is simply to know that what you lost in the waiting was real, that the pain of losing it was legitimate, and that neither the loss nor the pain disqualifies you from what is still ahead. They are part of the price. And the price is being honored, not wasted, not ignored, not forgotten, honored by the one who ordained the journey and who has never, not for a single day of the waiting, looked away from where you are. There is a moment in the night that has no name in ordinary conversation, but that every chosen one has lived inside. It is not the early evening when the day is still wrapping itself up, and there is still enough momentum from the hours behind you to carry you forward. It is not the late night when exhaustion finally wins and pulls you under into sleep. It is the specific hour that sits between those two, the hour when the house is completely still and the world outside has gone quiet, and there is nothing left to distract you from the full weight of everything you are carrying. The hour when the questions come with their sharpest edges. The hour when the distance between where you are and where you believed you would be feels not just large, but insurmountable. The hour when faith, which was manageable during the daylight, becomes the hardest thing you have ever been asked to hold. You know this hour. You have sat in it more times than you would choose to count. And if you have ever been in it, you know that no amount of positive thinking makes it smaller. No recitation of promises makes the ceiling above you feel less heavy. In that hour, the only thing that is real is the weight, and the silence, and the question underneath all the other questions, which is simply, is anything actually coming? Or have I been believing for something that was never really there? The ancient symbolic language of Scripture and of many wisdom traditions across human history has a specific name for that hour. It is called the midnight hour. And I want to tell you something about midnight that the darkness of it makes very difficult to see from the inside. Midnight is not the middle of the night. Midnight is the threshold of the morning. In the old way of reckoning time, before clocks and digital displays flattened everything into a uniform sequence, midnight was understood as the precise turning point. The moment at which the darkness reached its absolute peak, and then, without announcement, without visible sign, without any external evidence that anything had changed, began its retreat. The morning did not arrive at midnight, but the movement toward morning began at midnight. The shift happened in the invisible before it became visible. The turning came at the exact point that, from the inside of the darkness, felt most like the darkness was permanent. This is not a metaphor I am offering you as comfort. This is a pattern that runs through the oldest stories of chosen ones across every tradition that has ever tried to name what happens to the people who are set apart for something large. The breakthrough does not come when the circumstances look favorable. It comes at midnight. It comes at the point of greatest darkness. It comes when the chosen one has exhausted every resource of their own strength and has nothing left but the naked act of continuing to believe without evidence. Think about the story of Paul and Silas sitting in a prison cell at midnight, not in the morning when they had rested, not in the afternoon when their spirits were higher. At midnight, in chains, in the deepest point of a situation that had no visible exit, they began to sing, not because the situation had changed, not because they had received a sign that things were about to shift, but because something in them knew what midnight meant. Something in them understood that the darkness had reached its peak, and that the reaching of the peak was itself the signal that the turning was near and the walls moved. I am not promising you that singing in your midnight will produce an earthquake. I am telling you something more specific and more personal than that. I am telling you that the midnight hour you have been sitting in, the one that has felt the longest and the darkest and the most like evidence that nothing is coming, is not the middle of your waiting. It is the threshold of your morning. The darkness has reached its peak, and the reaching of the peak is the signal, not the sentence. At midnight, when everyone around you thought it was finished, when the external evidence said the story was over, heaven began to move. Now I want to introduce you to a second concept, one that sits alongside the midnight hour and gives it a deeper frame. Because understanding that you are at midnight is one thing. Understanding what the time before midnight was actually doing in you is another. And that understanding requires a word that does not exist in the ordinary vocabulary of modern life, but that the ancient traditions used with great precision and great care. The word is this: sacred waiting. Not all waiting is the same. This is a truth that the modern world, with its emphasis on speed and productivity and visible progress, has almost entirely lost the capacity to hold. The modern world understands waiting as a deficiency, as the gap between where you are and where the system has not yet delivered you, as something to be minimized, optimized, and eventually eliminated through better planning or better effort or better technology. In the modern frame, waiting is always a problem to be solved. But there is a category of waiting that the ancient traditions understood as something completely different. A category of waiting that is not the absence of movement, but is itself a form of movement. Not the pause before the story begins, but an active and irreplaceable chapter of the story itself. A kind of waiting that does not weaken the one who endures it, but that does something to them that no amount of activity or achievement or forward motion could produce. This is what the ancient traditions called sacred waiting. Sacred waiting is the season in which the chosen one is not being held back from their purpose, but is being formed into the person who can carry it. It is the season in which the qualities that the purpose requires, the depth of compassion, the steadiness under pressure, the capacity to hold hope without demanding its immediate proof, the ability to be moved by the pain of others because you have sat long enough in your own, are being built into the foundation of who you are, not added on top of who you are, like accessories. Built into the foundation, into the structural material of your character, so that when the purpose arrives, it does not find someone who has to quickly learn how to carry it. It finds someone who has been shaped over years to bear exactly that weight with, exactly that grace. You cannot produce the qualities of sacred waiting through effort. You cannot attend a seminar that gives them to you. You cannot read enough books or listen to enough messages or practice enough disciplines to manufacture what sacred waiting produces in a person. It can only come the way it came to every chosen one who carried it before you, through the actual experience of waiting without certainty, through the actual practice of holding on when the holding on costs something real, through the actual formation that happens in the hidden years, the years that do not appear on any resume, the years that look from the outside like nothing is happening, but that are in fact the most consequential years of the chosen one's entire story. The waiting did not weaken you. It set you apart for the divine. I need you to hear that not as a platitude, but as a structural truth about your specific history. Every year of the waiting was a year of formation. Every midnight you sat through was a threshold you crossed. Every moment you chose to hold on when letting go would have been easier was a moment in which something was being built into you that will be required by what is coming, and that could not have been built any other way. The people who will receive what you carry in the next season of your life are going to need someone who has been through the midnight and come out the other side. They are not going to need someone who has had a smooth and uninterrupted path to where they are standing. They are going to need someone who knows what the 3 a.m. question feels like from the inside. Someone who can sit beside another person's midnight without flinching. Someone who does not offer easy answers because they have personally discovered that easy answers do not survive contact with the real darkness. That is you. That is what the sacred waiting has been producing in you. Not just character in the general sense, but a specific kind of wisdom, a specific kind of presence, a specific kind of authority that comes only from having endured the thing you are now capable of helping others endure. The midnight hour is real. The darkness of it is real. The cost of the sacred waiting is real. None of that is minimized by what I am saying to you now. But I want you to add one more truth to all of that reality. A truth that does not cancel the darkness, but sits alongside it and changes what the darkness means. You are not in midnight because you are forgotten. You are in the midnight because you are at the threshold. The sacred waiting is not ending because it failed. It is ending because it is complete. What it was building in you has been built. What it was forming in you has been formed. What it was preparing you to carry, you are now ready to carry. The morning does not announce itself before it arrives. It simply comes, and it always comes after the midnight. Without exception, without fail, without a single midnight in the history of chosen ones that did not eventually give way to the light that was always on the other side of it. Your midnight is giving way. Not someday, now. The movement has already begun in the invisible, and the invisible always precedes the visible by exactly enough time for the chosen one to choose, one final time, to keep believing before the proof arrives. Keep believing. The morning is already moving toward you. Something is shifting. You may not have the language for it yet, and you may not be able to point to a single concrete piece of evidence that confirms it. But something in you already knows that the season you have been living in is changing its texture. It is subtle right now. It is the kind of change that you feel before you see it, the way you feel the temperature of the air shift before the rain actually arrives. But it is real, and it is directional, and it is moving toward you with a specificity and a purpose that has nothing to do with luck or coincidence or the random turning of circumstances. What is coming has your name on it. And I want to spend this part of our time together being as concrete as possible about what that means, because vague encouragement is one of the least useful things I can offer someone who has been waiting as long as you have. You deserve specifics. You deserve to know not just that something is coming, but what it is going to feel like when it arrives, what it is going to require of you in the days immediately before it fully manifests, and what you absolutely must not do in this critical window between the midnight and the morning. I feel something inside you that is coming alive again. Something that had gone quiet in the longest part of the waiting. Something that learned to be careful about hoping too loudly because it had been disappointed before. And the cost of that disappointment was high enough that the self-protective instinct took over and turned the volume down on the expecting. That thing inside you is beginning to stir again. Not all the way yet. Not with the full-throated certainty of someone who has already seen the outcome, but with a quiet, persistent, almost cellular sense that the energy around your life is reorganizing itself. That the pieces that have been scattered are beginning to find their way toward each other. That the story, which felt for so long like it was stuck in a chapter that would never end, has quietly turned a page. Let me tell you specifically what is moving in 3 areas of your life. The first area is your relationships. And what is about to happen here requires a particular kind of courage that I want to prepare you for, because it will not feel like a gift when it first begins. Some of the people who have been in your life for a long time are going to begin to move away from you. Not dramatically in most cases, not with conflict or confrontation or a defining moment that makes it clear that something has ended. They will simply begin to feel more distant. Conversations that used to flow will start to require more effort. The natural rhythm of the connection will begin to feel slightly off, like 2 people who used to walk at the same pace and have gradually, without anyone deciding anything, begun to walk at different speeds. And the gap between your speeds will widen in the coming weeks and months in a way that will sometimes feel like loss, because it is a kind of loss, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But here is what I need you to hold alongside that loss. The relationships that are moving away from you are moving away because they belong to the version of your life that is completing itself. They were right for the season that is ending. They served a real and important purpose in the years of the waiting, and that purpose is not diminished by the fact that they are not designed to travel into what is coming next. Not every relationship was built for every season of your life. Some were built for specific chapters, and the most loving thing the journey does for you is to allow those chapters to close gracefully so that the new ones can begin. Because here is the other side of what is moving in your relational world. New people are coming, and these will not be people you have to work to connect with, not people you have to perform for, or manage or explain yourself to at great length. They will be people who recognize something in you immediately. People whose presence in your life will feel less like a new acquaintance and more like a reunion. People who carry pieces of the purpose you were made for and who will recognize in you pieces of the purpose they were made for, and the connection between you will be one of those rare ones that feels at once completely new and strangely, deeply familiar. These people are already moving toward your life. Some of them are closer than you think. And the reason you have not yet met them, or have not yet recognized them, if you have already crossed paths, is that you were not yet standing in the place where the meeting could happen. You are moving toward that place now. The second area that is shifting is your sense of purpose. And I want to be precise about what this shift is going to look like, because it is not going to look the way you might expect. It is not going to arrive as a grand revelation, a moment of blinding clarity in which everything suddenly makes complete sense and the entire map of your future unfolds before you in full detail. It is going to arrive much smaller than that and much more quietly, and that smallness is going to be one of the most important things about it. It is going to arrive as one clear small step. The question that has been living in you for so long, the question of what you are supposed to do, what your actual specific contribution to the world is meant to be, what the purpose looks like in practical daily terms, that question is going to begin answering itself. Not all at once, not with a comprehensive plan attached, but one step is going to become clear. One direction is going to distinguish itself from the others with a quiet but unmistakable certainty. One thing is going to present itself, and something in you is going to know, without being able to fully explain the knowing, that this is the step, that this is the direction, that this small, perhaps seemingly ordinary thing is the first concrete expression of what you were made for. When that step presents itself, and it is closer to presenting itself than you currently believe, your only job is to take it. Not to wait until you can see the whole staircase. Not to wait until the destination is fully visible. Just to take the one step that is clear, trusting that the next step will become clear from the vantage point of having taken the first one. This is how purpose unfolds for a chosen one. Not in a single download of complete information, but in a sequence of faithful steps, each one revealing the next, each one building the confidence and the clarity that the following step requires. The third area that is shifting is the area of resources and opportunities. And this one I want to speak about carefully, because it carries the highest risk of being misunderstood or misapplied. And I care too much about where you are to be careless with it. What is changing in this area is not that you are suddenly going to start working harder or hustling more effectively or finally cracking the code of some strategy that has eluded you. What is changing is the relationship between your effort and your outcomes. For a long time, you have been exerting significant effort for disproportionately small results. You have been pushing doors that were not yet ready to open. You have been trying to manufacture through force what was always meant to arrive through alignment. And the exhaustion of that, the particular bone-deep weariness of someone who has been working very hard in the wrong direction or at the wrong time, is part of what has made the waiting so costly. What is coming is a season of alignment, a season in which the right opportunities begin to appear at the right moments, in which the right doors open, not because you finally pushed hard enough, but because you are now standing in front of the right doors at the right time, in which what belongs to you begins to find its way to you with a directness and an ease that will feel almost disorienting at first, because you have been so conditioned by the difficulty of the previous season that ease will initially feel suspicious. You will be tempted to wonder what the catch is. You will be tempted to hold back, to protect yourself from the possibility of another disappointment, to wait and see whether this new ease is real before you commit to it. And this is what I am asking you not to do. Do not let the memory of the difficulty make you suspicious of the ease. Do not let the years of closed doors make you hesitant when the open door appears. Do not let the conditioning of the waiting season cause you to hesitate at the threshold of the receiving season. What is coming to you is not a trap. It is not a test of your discernment disguised as a blessing. It is simply what was always meant to be yours, arriving in its appointed time, through the doors that were always appointed to open for you. Now I want to speak to what you must not do in this critical transitional window, because the space between the midnight and the morning is its own kind of delicate, and there are specific behaviors that can slow the transition if you are not aware of them. Do not make any major decisions from a place of impatience. The urgency you feel right now is real, and it is appropriate, but urgency is not the same as emergency. The shift that is happening does not require you to force an outcome in the next 72 hours. It requires you to remain present, attentive, and willing to move when the clear signal comes, but not before it comes. Forcing a door in this window is the one thing most likely to put you back into a longer version of the waiting. You are just now exiting. Do not go back to what is ending in order to ease the discomfort of the transition. The relationships that are completing, the environments that are feeling wrong, the old patterns of operating that your spirit is quietly rejecting, these are completing for a reason. Returning to them now, even temporarily, even for the comfort of the familiar, will cost you more than staying in the discomfort of the new. Do not shrink the dream to fit what currently seems possible. What is coming is not sized to your current circumstances. It is sized to the calling, and the calling has always been larger than the circumstances. Let the dream stay at its full size, even when the evidence around you suggests a smaller version is more realistic. Evidence changes. The dream was given before the evidence and will outlast it. And finally, do not walk this window alone if you can help it. Find the 1 or 2 people who can hold the full weight of what you are carrying without flinching, not to fix it for you, not to advise you out of your process, just to witness it. The chosen one who is seen in their transition moves through it with a grace and a speed that the isolated chosen one cannot access. You were not designed to cross every threshold alone. If you are sitting with all of this right now, and something in your chest is saying yes, something that is quieter than excitement but deeper than hope, I want you to type the word receive in the comments below. Not as a performance, as a declaration, as the first spoken word of the season that is beginning for you right now, today, in this exact moment. You are not almost there. You are at the threshold, and the threshold is not a place to rest indefinitely. It is a place to gather yourself, take one breath, and step through. The declaration you just made, whether you typed it in the comments or simply felt it rise up in your chest without the words making it all the way to your fingers, that declaration is not a small thing. It is the sound of someone who has been through the longest part of the journey and has arrived, perhaps without fully realizing it yet, at a place that required everything the journey cost to reach. And what I want to do now is give a name to who you are in this moment, not who you were before. The waiting, not who you will be after the fulfillment arrives and the story has resolved itself into something easier to narrate. Who you are right now, in this exact in-between place, standing at the edge of what is completing and the beginning of what is coming. The name I want to give you is this: you are a cycle breaker. I want to explain what that means with the specificity it deserves, because it is not a title that refers simply to personal achievement or individual resilience, though it includes both of those things. A cycle breaker is someone whose journey, as painful and as prolonged and as privately costly as it has been, was never only about them. The things you have walked through, the patterns you have refused to repeat, the generational defaults you have quietly declined to pass forward, the ways of operating in the world that were handed to you and that you chose, sometimes consciously and sometimes simply through the integrity of your character, not to hand to the next person in line. All of that has been doing something that extends far beyond your own story. You are the person in your lineage, in your community, in your sphere of influence, at whose feet certain things stop. Patterns of silence that have been running for generations. Patterns of self-abandonment dressed as humility. Patterns of accepting less than what was promised because accepting less felt safer than believing for the full thing. Patterns of smallness that were never yours to begin with, but that were placed on you early enough that they felt like your own skin. You have been the one in whom those patterns met their end. Not because you are stronger than the people who carried them before you, but because you were placed by a design larger than your own choosing at the exact point in the story where the breaking was possible, where the conditions were finally right for someone to say, consciously or simply by living differently, that this particular cycle ends here. That is not a small calling. That is one of the most significant things a human life can do, and the weight of it is part of why the journey has been as hard as it has been. Cycle breakers do not have easy paths because the cycles they are breaking have deep roots, and deep roots do not release without resistance. The resistance you have experienced in relationships, in systems, in your own internal patterns of thinking and believing was not random difficulty. It was the resistance of things that did not want to be broken, meeting the one who was appointed to break them. You are not just healing yourself, you are rewriting what comes after you. Now I want to guide you through something. I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes and allow yourself to do something that may feel slightly unusual, but that I am asking you to trust. I want to take you through a guided visualization, a way of seeing where you actually are right now that is different from the way the daily experience of your circumstances allows you to stop. Close your eyes if you are able to. If you are driving or in a situation where that is not possible, simply let your gaze soften and your attention turn inward. Take one breath that is slightly slower and slightly deeper than the ones you have been taking. Not a dramatic breath, just one that is intentional. One that signals to your body that you are shifting from the mode of doing into the mode of receiving. Now I want you to picture yourself standing at a threshold. It is a doorway, not an ornate or dramatic one. Simply a doorway, the kind you might walk through in an ordinary building, except that this one has a particular quality of light coming through it. A light that is not bright in the way that hurts your eyes, but warm in the way that draws you forward. You are standing just on the near side of it. Your feet are on the ground. Your body is steady. You are not running toward the door, and you are not retreating from it. You are simply standing present and still at the exact point where what was and what is coming meet. Now I want you to turn slowly and without urgency and look behind you. Look at the path you came from. Do not look at it with the eyes of judgment or regret. Look at it the way a traveler looks at a long road they have just finished walking, with the honest acknowledgement of its length and its difficulty and the full knowledge of what it cost to cover it. See the places where the road was dark. See the places where you could not see more than one step ahead and yet you kept walking. See the seasons that felt like they would never end. See the midnights you sat through. See the moments you nearly stopped, and the moments you found, from somewhere you cannot fully explain, the will to continue. Now I want you to notice something specific as you look at that road. Notice that you are not on it anymore. You walked it. You covered the full distance of it, every step of it. Not perfectly, not without stumbling, not without moments of sitting down in the middle of it and wondering whether you had the strength to stand back up. But you walked it, and you are not on it anymore. You are standing at the threshold. Now turn back toward the doorway. Look through it. You cannot see everything on the other side. The light is warm, but the full picture is not yet visible, and that is not a problem. That is exactly how thresholds work. You do not see the full destination from the doorway. You only see enough to take the step. And what you can see through that doorway is this: space, room, a landscape that is larger than the road you came from, a horizon that extends further than any horizon you have been able to see from any point on the road behind you. And I want you to notice something about where you are standing right now. You are not waiting at the threshold. You are not outside the doorway, looking in through a glass that you cannot break. You are standing in the frame of it. You have already arrived at the threshold. The hardest part of the journey was the road behind you. The part that is ahead of you begins with a single step, and you are already positioned to take it. Now I want you to feel what is underneath your feet at this threshold. Feel the ground. Feel how solid it is. Feel how it holds you without effort on your part. You do not have to earn the ground beneath your feet. It is simply there, holding you, as it has held you through every step of the road behind you, even the steps where you did not feel the ground and could not trust that it was there. It was always there, and it is here now, at the threshold, steady and certain beneath you. Take one more breath. And in this breath, I want you to carry something with you as you open your eyes and return to the room you are physically sitting in. Carry the knowledge of where you are actually standing, not where your circumstances currently say you are, not where the Chronos clock says you should be by now, where you actually are, in the truest and most complete account of your story. You are at the threshold. You have already made the journey. The door is already in front of you, and the ground beneath your feet is solid. You are a cycle breaker, and what you carry through that doorway is not just your own story. It is the beginning of a different story for everyone who comes after you. Now I want to speak a few words over you before we continue. Not as a performance and not as a formula, as an honest and specific blessing for someone who has walked the road I have been and who is right now, exactly where I said they are standing. May the clarity that has been building in the hidden season now begin to surface in your daily experience. May the relationships that are moving away from you leave with grace and without unnecessary pain, and may the ones that are coming find you quickly. May the one clear step that is presenting itself to you become unmistakable in the coming days, and may you find the courage to take it without waiting for the full staircase to be visible. May the resources that belong to your next season begin to move towards you with a directness that surprises you. May the midnight you have been sitting in give way today to the first light of the morning that has always been on the other side of it. And may you know, in the part of you that is quieter and deeper than the noise of doubt and the weight of the waiting, that you were never alone in any of it. Not for a single step of the road behind you, not at the threshold where you are standing now, and not through the doorway that is in front of you. You are seen, you are known, you are positioned, and you are ready. The blessing I just spoke over you was not a conclusion. It was a commissioning, and a commissioning is not the end of the story. It is the moment in the story where the chosen one stops receiving instructions and starts taking steps. So let me be as practical and as specific as I can be right now, because you have done the interior work in this message. You have sat with the grief, and the naming, and the reframing, and the blessing. And now the question that is living in the most grounded and actionable part of you is this: what do I actually do? Not in the abstract, not in the spiritual, in the physical, practical, today-shaped reality of my actual life. What do I do right now? That question is not a failure of faith. It is the right question. It is the question of someone who has crossed from the season of purely interior formation into the season where the interior and the exterior begin to move together. And I want to answer it as honestly and as concretely as I know how, across the three areas I introduced in the previous part of this message, because each of them has a specific and practical dimension that deserves to be addressed directly. The first area is relationships. And here is what the practical action looks like in this season. Stop managing the distance that is growing between you and the people who are moving away. I know the instinct is to try to close the gap, to invest more energy in the connection, to communicate more clearly, to find the thing you said or did or failed to do that created the distance and correct it. That instinct comes from a good place. It comes from loyalty and from love and from the deep human reluctance to let go of something that was once meaningful. But in this particular season, for these particular relationships that are completing their chapter, the management of the distance is costing you energy that belongs to what is coming. Let distance do what it is doing. Release the grip, not with bitterness and not with a dramatic declaration of ending, simply with the quiet, gracious acknowledgement that some connections were built for a season, and that the season has run its full and beautiful course. At the same time, begin paying attention to the new connections that are presenting themselves. And I want to be specific about what paying attention means here, because it is not about scanning your environment with anxious urgency looking for the people who are supposed to show up. It's about being genuinely present in the moments where new connections are offered. The conversation that starts unexpectedly. The person who appears in an environment you have only recently entered. The introduction that feels unremarkable on the surface, but that carries an inexplicable quality of recognition underneath. Pay attention to the quality of recognition. The people who belong to your next season will almost always carry that quality. Something in you will know them faster than your logical mind can explain. Trust that knowing. Do not talk yourself out of it by reminding yourself of how many times you have felt certain about something that did not work out. This is different. This belongs to the new season. And the new season has a different texture than the one you are exiting. The practical action in the area of relationships is this: make one gesture of genuine openness today. Not a grand gesture, not a vulnerable oversharing with a stranger. One small, real gesture of presence in a connection that is presenting itself. Return a message you have been putting off. Accept an invitation you have been hesitating about. Show up to something you almost talked yourself out of attending. One gesture, today, and then watch what it opens. The second area is purpose. And here the practical action is perhaps the most important thing I will say in this entire message. So I want you to receive it with the full weight it carries. Stop waiting for complete clarity before you begin moving. I know that sounds simple. I know that in the framing of it, it sounds like something you have heard before and that has not yet fully landed in the place where it needs to land in order to actually change your behavior. So let me say it with more specificity. The version of clarity you have been waiting for, the version where the full picture is visible and the complete plan is laid out, and every question has been answered, and every risk has been accounted for, and every contingency has been prepared for. That version of clarity is not coming before you begin. It has never come before anyone began. It is not the way purpose unfolds for a chosen one, or for anyone else for that matter. Complete clarity is a myth that the fear of beginning tells you is a reasonable prerequisite. It is not. It is a moving target that will always be just far enough ahead of you to justify one more day of waiting. What is coming, what is already presenting itself, if you are paying attention with honesty, is partial clarity. One clear step. One direction that feels more right than the others, not with complete certainty, not without any residual doubt, but with a quiet and persistent sense of rightness that keeps returning, even when you try to talk yourself out of it. That is not insufficient guidance. That is the guidance. That one step is the full instruction for today, not for the whole journey. For today. The practical action in the area of purpose is this. Identify the one step that has been presenting itself. The one you have been looking at and moving away from. Looking at and moving away from, in the rhythm of someone who is drawn to something, and simultaneously afraid of what beginning it will require of them. Name it. Write it down if you need to make it concrete. And then do one thing today. One single thing that moves you fractionally toward it. Send the email. Make the call. Research the thing. Open the document. Register for the class. Whatever the one thing is that exists at the very first edge of the step, do that one thing today. Not the whole step, just the first edge of it, and trust that the momentum of beginning will carry you to the next thing from there. Purpose does not wait for the fully prepared person. It moves toward the person who is willing to begin imperfectly. And the person who begins imperfectly is always, without exception, further along at the end of the day than the person who waited for perfect readiness. The third area is resources and opportunities, and this is where I want to speak most carefully, because it is the area where the chosen one is most vulnerable to two opposite errors that both lead to the same outcome. The first error is passivity dressed as faith. This is the posture that says, I am trusting God to bring what belongs to me, and therefore I do not need to position myself, to prepare myself, to make myself available to the opportunities that are moving toward me. I simply need to wait, and they will arrive. That posture is not faith. It is spiritual passivity wearing the costume of surrender. Real faith is not inactive. Real faith moves, it prepares, it positions, it makes room for what it is believing for. It acts as though the promise is real before the promise is fully visible, not by manufacturing the outcome, but by becoming the person who is ready to receive it. The second error is striving dressed as diligence. This is the posture that says, I need to make this happen. I need to push harder, open more doors, send more messages, take more meetings, work more hours, force the opportunity into existence through the sheer volume of my effort. This posture comes from the right impulse, the impulse to participate actively in your own story, but it is misdirected, striving in the wrong direction, against doors that are not yours to open, against timing that is not yet ready, against opportunities that are not aligned with the specific thing you were made for, produces exhaustion without progress. And you have already had enough of that particular experience. The right posture for this season sits between those two errors. It is active receptivity. It is the posture of someone who has prepared the ground, who has made themselves available, who has positioned themselves in the right environments and the right conversations and the right states of mind and heart, and who then holds that preparation with open hands rather than clenched fists, not forcing, not passive, prepared and open, ready to move when the signal comes, but not running ahead of the signal out of impatience. The practical action in the area of resources and opportunities is this. Audit your availability. Look at the ways in which you are currently spending your time, your energy, your attention, and ask honestly whether the investment matches the direction you are moving toward. Are there commitments in your life right now that belong to the old season and that are consuming bandwidth that the new season needs? Are there environments you are showing up to out of habit or obligation that are not the environments where the opportunities of the next season are likely to appear? Are there ways in which you are spending the best hours of your day on things that are not connected to the direction that has been presenting itself as the right one? You do not need to burn everything down. You do not need to make dramatic and immediate changes to every area of your life. But I am asking you to take one honest look at where your availability is going and to make one adjustment, one small but real reallocation of time or energy or attention in the direction of what is coming rather than in the opposite of what is completing. One relationship gesture, one step toward purpose, one reallocation toward the new season. Those are your 3 practical actions for today, not tomorrow, not next week when the circumstances feel more favorable or the clarity feels more complete. Today, because the season that is beginning does not wait for a more convenient starting point. It is already starting. It started the moment you arrived at this message. And every day between now and the full manifestation of what is coming is a day in which you get to choose in small and practical ways whether you are oriented toward what is ending or toward what is beginning. Choose what is beginning. Choose it today. Choose it in the small practical actions that no one else may see or acknowledge or celebrate. Choose it in the one gesture and the one step and the one reallocation. Choose it not because the outcome is guaranteed, though it is, but because the choosing is itself an act of faith, and faith at the threshold is the most powerful thing a chosen one can bring to the moment that has been waiting for them. You are not getting ready to step into your next season. You are already stepping. The step began when you showed up here. Keep going. There is something I want to say to you before this message closes. And I want to say it without any of the scaffolding of teaching or instruction or protocol that has carried us through everything that came before. I want to say it simply from one honest voice to the person who has stayed through every part of this journey today. And what I want to say is this: thank you for showing up. Not thank you in the polite and performative way that fills the space between a speaker and an audience. Thank you in the specific and genuine way that one person thanks another when they understand what the showing up actually cost. Because I know something about the kind of person who stays through a message like this one. I know that you did not arrive here to today from a place of comfort and surplus. You arrived here from a place of genuine need, from the kind of need that a person accumulates after a long time of carrying something heavy without enough people around them who can see the weight clearly enough to help carry it. You showed up today not because everything is fine, but because something in you, that quiet and persistent knowing that we named at the very beginning of this message, refused to stop looking for the thing that would finally name what you have been living through. And you stayed through the naming of the pain and the acknowledgement of what the waiting took, and the midnight, and the sacred waiting, and the threshold, and the blessing, and the practical steps. You stayed through all of it, and that staying is not a small thing. That is the act of someone who has not given up. Someone who, despite every pressure the long season has applied to the flame of their believing, has not let the flame go out. That person deserves to be thanked, honestly and specifically. So I am thanking you now. I also want you to know something that I mean with the full weight of every word. You are not alone in this room. Right now, at this exact moment, as you are reading or listening to these words, there are chosen ones all across this world who are walking into this exact same message, in different time zones, in different languages, in different circumstances that look nothing like yours on the surface, but that carry the identical interior texture of what you have been living through. Someone in a city you have never visited is sitting with the same unnamed grief you named today. Someone on the other side of the world woke up at the same hour you woke up last night and asked the same question you asked the ceiling. Someone who has never heard your name and whose name you will never know is standing at the same threshold you are standing at, having walked a road that cost them as much as yours has cost you, holding the same fragile and tenacious hope that something is coming. You are not singular in your struggle. You are part of a company of chosen ones who are all, in this season, moving through the same corridor from the midnight into the morning. And that company, even when you cannot feel it, even when the experience of your daily life feels entirely isolated and entirely private, is real. You are held within something larger than your individual story. And that larger thing is moving, all of it, in the same direction now. I want to invite you to do one final thing before you close this message and return to the ordinary shape of your day. I want to invite you to lay something down. You have been carrying a weight, not one weight, several. The accumulated weight of the years of waiting, the grief of what was taken, the cost of the midnight hours, the exhaustion of believing without consistent evidence, the specific heaviness of being seen publicly as someone who is managing fine, while privately carrying something that no casual conversation has ever been able to hold. You have been carrying all of that, and you have been carrying it largely in your body, in your shoulders and your chest, and that particular tightness behind your eyes that appears when you have been holding something too long without being able to set it down. I want you to picture the threshold again, the one we visited in the previous part of this message, the doorway with the warm light coming through it. You are still standing there. You are still at the threshold. And I want you to do something that the threshold makes possible, something that the middle of the road did not allow, because you needed the weight to motivate your walking. I want you to set the heaviness down, not the hope, not the knowing, not the calling or the dream or the quiet certainty that you were made for something specific. Those you carry with you through the door, but the heaviness, the grief, the accumulated exhaustion, the weight of every year that cost more than it was supposed to cost, the burden of every midnight you survived. I want you to picture yourself setting all of that down at the threshold, placing it on the ground at the edge of the doorway, and straightening up, feeling what your body feels like without it, feeling the difference between the weight and the person underneath the weight, and recognizing that the person underneath is still there, still whole, still standing, lighter than they have felt in a very long time. You do not need to carry the weight through the door. What is on the other side of the threshold does not require the weight. It requires you, just you, the you that exists underneath everything the waiting, piled on top of you. That you is enough, that you has always been enough, and that you is the one the next season was designed to receive. Leave the weight at the threshold. Walk through the door. Now I want to ask something of you, and I want to ask it in a way that is as far from obligation as I know how to make it, because what I am about to ask is not about me, and it is not about numbers. It is about the chosen one who has not yet found this message, the one who is going to wake up next. Monday morning, in the kind of quiet that you know from the inside, the particular quiet of someone who is carrying something enormous and has not yet found anywhere to put it down. That person exists. They are real. And right now, they do not know that this message is waiting for them. If this message reached something real in you today, if it did something that had gone unnamed for longer than it should have, if it met you at the threshold and helped you see where you were actually standing, I am asking you to do one thing: share it. Not because the channel needs the views, though the reach matters, but because the chosen one who needs this message next week will only find it if someone who was reached by it today decides to pass it forward. That is how this works. That is how the right message finds the right person at the right moment. Someone decided to send it. Be that someone for the chosen one in your life who is living in the midnight and does not yet know that the morning is already moving toward them. Like this video if something in it landed as true. Subscribe to this channel so that the next message, when it comes, finds you without you having to go looking for it. And if you are moved to support the work of building these messages, to contribute to the time and the care and the research that goes into finding the right words for the right season, there is a donation link in the description below. Whatever amount feels right to you. No amount is too small. Every contribution goes directly toward making sure that the next chosen one who stumbles onto a hard morning has somewhere to land. You are not paying for content. You are paying it forward to someone whose name you do not yet know, but whose need is as real as yours was when you arrived here today. And one more thing, gently and without pressure, because this is not a sales moment. It is simply an honest acknowledgement of something that may have found you in the middle of this message. If the genius wave met you somewhere in the journey we took together today, if the conversation about brainwave frequency and the 7 minutes of deep practice and the science of what happens when a chosen one begins operating from their deepest cognitive state resonated with something you already knew in your body was true, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. Not as an obligation, not as the conclusion of this message, simply as a door that is open. If you know it is a yes, you came here today carrying something heavy. You are leaving with something you did not have when you arrived. A name for what you have been living through. A framework for understanding the season you are in. A practice to begin today. A blessing spoken specifically over you. And the knowledge, which I hope has settled into something more than a feeling by now, that the conversation happening about you at a level you cannot always access is not the conversation you feared it was. It was never about your failures. It was never about what you have not yet become. It has always been about your appointment, about what has been prepared for you, about the specific and irreplaceable role that only you, with your exact history and your exact wound and your exact tenacious refusing to let go faith, can fill in the story that is still being written. The chosen ones across this world are walking into their morning. You are one of them. And the morning is real, and it is coming, and it has your name on it. Go walk through the door. And one last thing, so quiet it barely needs to be said, so true it does not need to be argued. Wherever you go after this message, whatever room you walk into, whatever conversation you sit down for, whatever ordinary moment receives you next, you go there marked. Not marked by what the waiting cost you, marked by what the waiting made you. Carry that quietly, wear it without announcing it, and trust that the people who need to recognize it in you will recognize it. Without you, word, you are blessed, you were always blessed, and now you know it.